Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Tomb Raider. I think the thing that best describes Tomb Raider is its overall sort of fineness, in that when you saw it, you'd probably think, that's alright, I'm fine with this. And that's probably the thing you'll most remember about it, if you remember anything at all. It's so middle of the road you might actually forget it's there, making it sort of a weird reflection of video game adaptations in general, in that you have either ones that you go, oh wow, they made a Need for Speed movie, or hey, do you remember the disaster that was the Super Mario Brothers movie? There seems to be very little in between. It's either a terrible disaster like Warcraft or something, or it's like sort of fine that they did that, I guess. And this is kind of more in that category. Now, I haven't played a Tomb Raider game, or if I have, I did it like once and I don't remember it very well. That's not a criticism of the game. I just like don't play video games that much. I'm aware of Tomb Raider. I didn't see the previous movies, but I saw this one for... I'm not sure why I did that, but I saw this one. Tomb Raider kind of makes me a little sad because this seems to be the best that video game movies can get at this point. It's sad for a couple reasons, but I think the main reason is because it doesn't really feel like a video game for like most of it. Like certain parts do, but like it takes forever to get to those parts. You know, if someone was like, is this based on a book or something? Like, if they didn't know, I wouldn't be that surprised. Now, they'd be very unself-aware or something, but it's more of a reflection on the film itself. Now, it doesn't have to scream video games the whole time, but I think the reason they don't need to is because, one, this was already a movie franchise, probably one of the bigger video game movie franchise adaptations, or video game adaptation franchises. I think it's like sort of Resident Evil in this, right? I think that's sort of it. The interesting thing about this is the reason I think the Tomb Raider franchise can be a film franchise. There already is kind of the film language for kind of Indiana Jones type adventure kind of stories and all that stuff. So the idea of something like Tomb Raider kind of coming in and doing that and kind of just fits within a pre-established film language. Whereas like something like Super Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog, or kind of the big, most iconic things that most people think of when they play video games, are under their own different visual language that is attributed to video games. So when we think of something like Tomb Raider, I think it's been able to sneak in basically by sort of not having to make the sacrifices that other video games to movies necessarily have. And I think that's sort of like the odd thing about Tomb Raider, because it's not like Warcraft or Angry Birds, or although I guess Angry Birds, that one sort of worked out. Like after this I was like, I don't really want to play a Tomb Raider game. I was kind of like, oh, that was a fine action movie, I guess. And that's sort of the weird thing about Tomb Raider. It feels like it's like made to be watched on a plane and then forgotten. Like when you get off the plane, like, oh, did you watch a movie on the plane? And you're like, yeah, I watched Tomb Raider. And they go, oh yeah, sure. And that's sort of all you're gonna get from that. They're like, hey, was it as good as... I guess this is based on the 2013 game, which was sort of a relaunch, or so I've heard from people who have played these things that aren't me. And this was supposed to be sort of a return to form for Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. It's the video game was made as sort of a reboot sort of origin story, and this plays in that as well. And I don't know if I really think it really reboots it in a way that I'm like, oh, this is for, you know, 2017 and stuff, or 2018. It's 2018. I keep needing to tell myself that. She doesn't really feel like an independent, you know, kind of woke, or she doesn't have to be woke, but, you know, woman of the moment. It feels like, you know, she has no real interest in archaeology. She has no interest in any of these things. She kind of just does it for her dad. And it feels really bland in that case. It doesn't feel like they sort of reinvented her for a new generation. It feels like they just were like, hey, what if we did this again? I mean, there's not much really here. In terms of a pulpy, kind of fun little action movie, sure, this is fine, but I'd much rather watch Kong Skull Island, which had fun with its pulpiness. And I think in some ways this makes movies that most people like disregard, that I have a lot of fun with, seem even more fun, because this movie isn't really that fun. Alicia Vikander in this role is actually pretty good. She does the most kind of movie star kind of acting she's ever really done. Of course, she's a good actress. She was in Ex Machina and she was very good in that. She has an Oscar for like a movie nobody remembers already, but she is a very good actress, and I think it was interesting seeing her pull off the movie star charm as well as she does, particularly in the beginning. I was like picking like female leads for things, I would consider her for more things, you know, not just like weird art movies or something, like big budget kind of blockbuster things. And she definitely like holds her own in this movie, and I think she is a compelling lead, but she only has so much to work with. If there had been a little more in this, and even the physical stuff doesn't feel as fun. I'm sure she did her own stunts and stuff, but it doesn't have that feeling to it. I think you really have to get into the physicality to it, whether you're Keanu Reeves or Charlize Theron. The reason both of those performances worked from kind of sort of like friend directors wasn't just because, you know, you saw them kick ass, is because there was a tactileness to it. And certainly this film understands that to a certain degree, because it really like lays out the stakes with the dad thing, and it like makes sure you know the stakes all the time and everything like that. And it was fine with that, but you know, for a film that's supposed to really sell like this action, it didn't really have it as much. You know, most of the cool action stuff you've seen in the trailers, and then everything else you kind of don't really need to. It didn't feel like it was having as much fun with the characters, and you could say as a kind of a way out from criticizing it to say, oh well, pulpy stuff didn't have that, so we can get away with this. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, I guess, but I don't think that's like really true. And if you're really trying to do something different with this, then maybe you should like have some fun with these characters. You know, it sort of hints at sequels in a really boring, you know, kind of modern movie way, and it sort of just kind of goes on the autopilot that these kind of films do. It's certainly like decent at it. It like runs on autopilot in a very decent, comfortable way that you can just sit back and get to your destination and, you know, just chill out and almost not even think about how you got there. And that's, you know, what Tomb Raider's particularly good at, to be honest. It's very good at being an okay movie. If there was an Oscar for most okay movies, I think this movie might win one, or everyone went okay whatever and didn't actually show up to do those, which sort of would make sense, because it'd be like, we're giving it to Tomb Raider, fuck this, I'm not getting out of bed. Walter Goggins I liked, but didn't feel like he was as into this. Dominic West was fine. I just don't feel like this film will elicit any passion in anyone. I don't think this is also a film that's really going to change the video game kind of adaptations in terms of Hollywood. I think that will happen one day. I don't think we're as close to it as everyone would like to be, and you sort of need a Kevin Feige to do that. And something like this will just be something to say like, oh well, hey, you like video game adaptations, there's also this one. It also doesn't help that Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle is sort of semi, not entirely, and not really in a lot of ways similar to this film, but I think what Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle did is it had fun with the video game concept. There's only really a couple things that definitely feel like video game sequences, but in Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, they reference, you know, knowledge of video games and how video games work a lot more, and that was a much more enjoyable movie. Like, I would see Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle or Jumanji 2 or whatever it is, I would watch that again gladly. I had a lot of fun with that movie. Tomb Raider just doesn't have that fun and love to it in terms of making sure the audience like really loves watching this thing. This is just more like, oh cool, I had an action sequence there and there was some action that happened. None of the action, like it had some stakes to it and had sort of like, in its kind of average modern moviness, but it didn't really go much beyond that. It was kind of like, oh cool, you did that, but if we're being real with ourselves, am I really going to be that impressed with it? Certainly, like if I made something like that as someone who has not choreographed an action sequence or something, I would be impressed with myself. But other than that, I don't think this, like, in terms of what's going on in Hollywood, I don't think it's honestly all that interesting. You know, I can think of films whose action sequences I wasn't even really that into, and I like them more than a lot of what happened in this. I sort of like the plane thing, I sort of like certain sequences, but I don't really love them, you know. And for a film that's really selling itself as this like kind of action adventure, the action didn't really work. The adventure doesn't really work either. It works in kind of that bland adventure film sort of way, and that's sort of what kind of makes you just go sure with it. It makes you just go, I'm fine with this, I guess, and let's all just sort of move on from it and just get to the next weekend when another big movie comes out. This feels like a placeholder. This feels like it is holding its beer for the next big movie, and it very much doesn't really mind being that. So you're kind of like watching it going like, okay, I guess we're sort of on the same terms of apathy, and that's sort of where you are with Tomb Raider. You know, it doesn't care enough to have as much fun with the video game and really sell to the people who presumably love this character. It very much wants to be this kind of like just stay on this weird drama and daddy issues things that don't really honestly play as well as I think this movie would like to pretend it does, or mean as much with the audience as they like to pretend it does, because they never really get into these characters, let you delve into them and really love them. They're just kind of playing the archetypes that they're supposed to within the map of film language that was there before Tomb Raider got there and what influenced the original Tomb Raider game in the first place, but they don't actually do something with it to show how this game would be different, how adapting this video game property into a movie would be interesting. If there was never a Tomb Raider game and you made this movie in that dimension, it would play just as fine. They might say, like, why was there a game sort of thing in that part? But I don't think they'd honestly question it that much. And that kind of says a lot about how they adapted this, but it also, you know, I just don't think this film is even really that remarkable. It's kind of a film you can fall asleep to on the couch. It's a film you can watch on the bus, in a train. You can watch it with green eggs and ham and think more about your green eggs and ham than ever thinking about Tomb Raider. And that's kind of where Tomb Raider is. A film that just sort of plays, it occupies your time, and it does really not much else, but you'll probably have a decent enough time watching it occupy your time as you walk away from it and don't think about it again until you hear something about Alicia Vikander and someone brings up Tomb Raider and you go, oh yeah, sure, yeah, no, I remember that. Just the fact that this existed in its middle of the roadness and you might remember its existence is probably the biggest triumph that this film will probably ever have. So if you've seen Tomb Raider and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.